All right, so the Munter hitch. And we talked about building it on a carabiner. One more time. Bam, like that. Bring this around and bam, like that. Now it's built on the carabiner. Let's talk a minute about the functionality of the Munter hitch. So now, imagining that I am wanting to belay myself in, not that I would necessarily be wanting to do that, but if I were, this is how I would belay a person in. This is my brake strand. This is the strand going to the climber, and I will start bringing them in. Notice that when I started pulling them in, the Munter hitch flipped over. Now I can start bringing them in. And if they were to fall, the interesting thing about the Munter is the brake hand goes forward like this to catch the fallen climber. Unlike pretty much every other braking situation with an ATC or similar such devices, usually you brake behind, but with the Munter, you brake down toward the loaded strand. That is a brake. The other thing about a Munter is they do have a reputation for sort of kinking the rope, causing little coils, pigtails in the rope. It does some of that. There's a couple things you can do to avoid that problem. The first thing you can do with a Munter to avoid that problem is you can, when pulling in the rope, you can try to keep the brake strand as parallel as possible to the load strand. And I just said when pulling in the rope, but also when letting out the rope. So when pulling in the rope, keep those parallel. And then when letting out the rope, keep those parallel. The greater this angle, the more kinkage you're going to introduce. The next thing is when letting out rope, try to actually grab the rope and feed sections of it through the Munter hitch. Notice how I'm feeding it with my hand versus simply letting it run through my hand like that. That has a tendency to introduce kinks, whereas feeding sections through helps move those kinks through the rope. So those are a few tips about the Munter hitch. We covered the reasons you'd want to use the Munter hitch. We talked about the air Munter. We talked about building it on a carabiner. And we talked about some of the particularities of the function in braking and eliminating kinking in usage. Later on, we'll do the Munter Mule overhand, but we'll get there next.